Excellent. Welcome everyone to another Us the Professionals. Wow, it's been nearly 2 years now that we've been running these. They're going so well. I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of country, and then we'll get into our introductions. I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting today here in Canberra, and pay respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal Nation, both past and present. And I extend this respect to Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander peoples in attendance today. And feel free in the chat to please put your name, where you're calling in from, and who you pay your respects to for today. Just a little bit of an intro. I'm Bri Norton. I'm co-chair with Amanda of OZeWAI, and OZeWAI changed recently from being an annual conference to a professional membership. I think a few years ago we did some research and we kind of worked out that the OZeWAI conference, we were kind of hoping that we'd do ourselves out of a job, and we've kind of worked out that that's not happening. We now know that accessibility specialists are needed, consistency and quality of accessibility specialists are needed, and a community of, to support those people who may be on their own in their organisations, or need that kind of networking, needs that professional membership and that approach that we are trying to do, as well as some advocacy work, trying to get together to push for digital accessibility apprenticeships with the Future Skills organisation, and supporting community practices in larger organisations in how they can build up their capabilities and understanding of accessibility. We also now, instead of having our annual conference, we partner with in-person conferences. So where there is transparency on how people are paid and support for people with disability, we encourage our members to assist with maybe an accessibility lab and volunteers and give back to our community in exchange for access to some of these amazing conferences, including web directions. And we are also in the process of supporting the DDD Adelaide as well this year. So we'll be looking for our volunteers or our members who would like to attend those and, do some demonstrations and show their skills. Keep an eye out for that. If you haven't joined already, we have a pretty cheap membership of $50. And if you join now in June, any membership level, it covers you for the next financial year. So we're not going to ask you to pay again in July, so you're covered. But we also do have a consultancy directory where you can find specialists of different expertise, and we'd love feedback on that, because we do know that that could be growing in different ways, different expertise in different topics that people are looking for. And we're always willing to learn and grow as part of our professional organisation. So thank you. Myself, I'm Bri Norton. I'm with Ability Works a couple of days a week, mentoring some the inclusive design team there in Melbourne, even though I'm based in Canberra. I'm also on the Accessible ICT Standards Committee for Standards Australia, and also part of the Research Ops Cheese Board. So great to be here. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ricky to do the rest of the introductions, and then we'll get into our questions. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ricky.
Hello, all. My name's Ricky Onsman. I'm be moderating this particular Ask the Professional session. I'm the Chief Technical Writer for an US-based agency called TPGi, which operates on a global basis. I write guidance for accessibility engineers on how to do their job. And today is a bit of an unusual Ask the Professional session, in that usually we get a panel of 3, maybe 4 people who focus on a particular technical subject, one kind or another, related to digital accessibility. But we thought this time we'd take a slightly different approach, and what we've got is 5 people who represent accessibility meetups in different states and territories around the country. They all have their particular quirks and particular pros and cons. And what we thought we'd do is kind of compare notes between how the various meetups work. And this ties into something that we have a kind of, as Bri alluded to, an idea about what if there was a national meetup that took place online, where you didn't have to be in any of the capital cities, you could join it from wherever you are. Now, we don't know about the viability of this really, and what we especially don't want to do is step on the toes of people who are already running community-based meetups in the various cities and territories. So, what we've got today is we've got representatives from Melbourne, from Perth, from Canberra, from Sydney, and from Tasmania. And I say Tasmania specifically because they are in the unusual position where they run their meetups in two different cities. So what I might do is actually start there and throw first of all to our representative from Tasmania and ask her to introduce herself and just give a brief overview of how the digital accessibility meetup works in Tasmania. Over to you, Rosie Putland.
Thanks, Ricky. Rosie speaking. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. My name's Rosie Putland. My pronouns are she, her, and I am proudly disabled. I'm also the founder of the Tasmanian Accessibility Community, which is a community that has been running for almost 2 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. I'm also the founder of ModalityCo, which is a small digital accessibility consultancy that runs as a social enterprise, which provides support, digital accessibility and accessible communication support, particularly to small businesses. And I also work part-time for children and young people with disability Australia as well. The Tasmanian accessibility community started up almost 2 years ago now, and we were really inspired by the Perth accessibility community. Matthew Putland, who's also on the call today, and I started our accessibility careers in WA and were really, really well supported by the Perth community. And so when we moved to Tasmania 3 years ago, we were really missing that sort of community. Oh, might even be. I can't remember how many years ago now. I think 3 years ago. We were really missing that community as well. Originally, we were living in Launceston, and then we moved to Burnie, which is on the northwest coast of Tasmania. And we kind of thought, oh, an accessibility community is not really going to work in Launceston or in Burnie. How are we going to make this function to work? And so we really thought about how that might work in Tasmania. And eventually we've decided on the path of we actually meet in Hobart every second month. So we drive from Burnie to Hobart, usually after work in the dark, to go down for the next day for our meetup. And we run in Hobart in person at Rosny Library every second month, and we're always virtual. So our Hobart event is a hybrid event. So we have people joining in from all around the state in person and online in the Hobart event. And then we also meet completely virtually every second month, just so that we're not driving down to Hobart every single month. It's been running really, really well so far, and we've actually expanded to being less solely focused on digital accessibility, but more broadly focused on accessibility in general, and combining the powers of all the different people working in accessibility in Tasmania in all different ways, whether it be physical or digital, or in the policy spaces as well. And we've been able to teach each other so much, and that's probably the biggest part that I love about our community, is how much that we're able to teach each other from our different fields as well. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll leave it at there, but I'm sure we'll get to talk about more different specific parts of it as we go through.
That's terrific. Thank you, Rosie. That gives us a bit of an idea of how it works in Tasmania. And I guess one of the things there is that it's a good example of really it has taken two people who were determined to just make it happen. And I think that's a very important point there as well. Not even also taking into account just things like the size of the population, that give it a particular flavour indeed. To get an idea
absolutely.
to get an idea of a completely different flavour, let's swing to the opposite end of the country in the far west, and we might get Amanda Mace to tell us a little bit about the Perth Accessibility Meetup, which in some ways is probably one of the most successful in the country. I'll throw it over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Ricky. So my name is Amanda Mace, and my day job is vice president of a digital accessibility firm called GrackleDocs, which is Canadian-based, but much like TPGi, serves globally. I'm in charge of the Australasia region as vice president of GrackleDocs. So I take care of Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, which means a few trips a year to Singapore, which is always really nice. I actually quite enjoy that, despite the humidity. Uh, and so I only recently in the last year took over leading the Perth group. The Perth group is actually the meetup started in November of 2010. So it's probably one of the oldest meetups in the country in terms of digital accessibility. I was not involved in that particular meetup. In fact, I had only been in the country, I think, a year and a half at that point. And I had a brand new baby. So sorry, would have been just a baby at the time. But I joined 3 years later as when I was introduced to digital accessibility as I started my career in this industry. And a year after I joined, which was 2013 and 2014, we had the very first Perth Web Accessibility Camp, which is well, it started out as we'll have one day and everyone can do presentations. And it was actually supposed to be quite a chilled, unconferencey sort of thing. But now it's pretty conferencey, to be honest. We're bringing in speakers from overseas as keynotes. It's become one of the biggest annual events for digital accessibility in the country, which is really exciting. We've outgrown the venue that we were meeting at for the last several years because we have too many people coming, which is really great. So we've just celebrated 11 years of PWAC, or the Perth Web Accessibility Camp. We have recently gone through, again, because we've been so lucky. We've got such a great community here in Perth, and even abroad from that, that we've been really lucky to have some great volunteers. So we recently went through some rebranding. We've upped our social media presence. We have a new logo. We've really been putting a lot of effort into getting ourselves out there. Traditionally, the Perth meetup would meet in person for breakfast. That was kind of our go-to. We would have breakfast in person. Someone would present some sort of topic. But what became really obvious, even pre-COVID, we were actually really lucky here in Perth. WA didn't have a lot of lockdown, so we could still meet during COVID. We were able to meet without being online. We still had breakfast together. Everyone wore a mask except for when they were sipping their coffee. We were really lucky that way. But what we discovered is there are only so many people in Perth, and to bring speakers in, we were having to bring like someone in online. So we had this dual function where we'd meet for breakfast at a cafe with someone online with a speaker that would be brought with us. So this little Bluetooth speaker that would then project whoever the presenting, and then people could join via Zoom. And it actually just got very messy. The cafe was too loud. We couldn't hear the speaker. People who were there physically wanted to chat, and then the people online were feeling excluded, and it kind of got a bit messy. So last year, we went to the group with the idea of going online for our monthly meetups and still having the conference or the camp as an in-person networking, getting together big event. So we've been doing that now for several months, and it's been really successful. The biggest success that we've had of that is the quality of speakers and topics, like just the range of topics that we can cover. We've been able to bring in international speakers. It's actually, because it's a breakfast meeting for Perth, it's actually quite friendly for Melbourne and Sydney and Tasmania. It's also quite time friendly for the East Coast and the West Coast of North America. The only ones who it's not time friendly for are the Europeans. So we've been able to bring in North American guest speakers from over East. It's actually been really, really, really positive, and a huge shout out. I see Anas is in the room today. He's been in charge of the social media for about a year now, and it's gone absolute gangbusters since then. So yeah, and he also did the redesign for the Perth group's new logo, and yeah, we're working on the new website soon to come.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you've taken it online, but you're still keeping it at breakfast time. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is that just due to general demand or habit, or?
Yeah, we just find that people, we got used to having that slot. So it's usually the third Tuesday of the month, and people are kind of used to doing it. So I often do it. I'm getting my kids ready for school. So I'll have it on my phone. People are quite used to watching me sip my coffee and braid my daughter's hair. Yeah, it's become a real habit, I guess, for people in Perth, and it's worked out well because it means other areas can join us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And just to put it in perspective for some of our international attendees, Perth is, well, it's probably the most isolated city in the world. So it's a long way away from anywhere else. And I guess it's always had a reputation of being seeing itself as a bit quirky and a bit different from the rest of Australia. And I know from my time that I've spent in Perth that it was at one stage the only place that held a digital accessibility conference in the country, the Edge of the Web. It was the centre of the Australian Web Industry Association. So it has a particular set of characteristics that make it quite different from the rest of Australia. I'm not saying better, I'm not saying worse, I'm just saying different.
I'll say it.
Okay, so what we might do now is there's a couple of examples of accessibility meetups that have gone through a series of phases, and there are two that probably have got to the point where they're not as active as they used to be. So what I might do is cross to Adem Cifcioglu, who's from Intopia, based in Melbourne, and he's had a long association with the Melbourne Digital Accessibility Meetup. So I might throw it over to you, Adem.
Yep, thanks, Ricky. So I am the founder of the Melbourne Web Accessibility Meetup. We started in what, 20, I want to say 2011, 2012, because it was somewhere around there. It could have potentially been 2013. But we have gone through a bit of a change over the years. So we started as a breakfast meetup, which I think was similar to what Perth did. We caught up with there'd be sort of 6 to 7 of us at a cafe catching up monthly, and I think at that point it was a third Tuesday or Wednesday of the month, and we'd do breakfast and have a chat. We then moved that to a dinner because people went, oh, breakfast is cool, but after work is easier, so let's do it. Let's do a dinner. So we did that for a couple of years. And then we moved into more sort of presentation-based meetups where we wouldn't necessarily meet monthly, but it'd be sort of semi-regular at that point, and we'd have kind of your sort of one speaker, two speakers, sort of lightning presentation style talks, which was pretty good for a while, and we got attendees to those would be anywhere between sort of 30 and 50 or more, depending on what we could get in terms of venues and how many people we could hold there. We then kind of there was a period in there where COVID hit, and we'd sort of slowed down by that point anyway, but then COVID hit and we kind of went, oh, this is kind of okay. We can go online and re-energize things again. What we didn't necessarily account for, including myself, was that after having to be on meetings and video conferences for 8 hours a day, people didn't then want to come home and sit on a conference call for a meetup for 2 hours after work. So that didn't kind of go as well as we thought it would, but we've reinvigorated things now. I've got a co-organizing group of another 3 people plus me, so there's 4 of us now, and the plan is to meet once every 2 months going forward. And we've seen that seems to work for people. They seem to respond really well, and it feels like it's the right cadence for us to get people back into in-person events, back into kind of that presentation style meetup and just general sort of networking chit chat style of event.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think all kinds of organisations that try to meet like this on a regular basis, they go through their ups and downs and changes as time. And COVID has been a thing that has affected everybody pretty much everywhere in terms of meeting face to face on a regular basis. I think it's also interesting that Melbourne has kind of probably overtaken Sydney in a lot of ways as the most heavily populated city of people who work in digital accessibility. It's not a coincidence, Adem, that your mob, Intopia, now have all three directors living in Melbourne. And there's, other agencies as well that work out of a very busy city. And I mean, Melbourne has that kind of that cultural appearance of, a coffee-based culture, a getting together kind of culture. So it should be a very attractive option to get together on a regular basis to talk about things like digital accessibility. And it's very interesting to see how these things evolve over time. And personally, I'm very glad to hear that you remain committed to the concept of it. And it's interesting to get your perspective on what your plans are for the future. And in the same kind of way, I might throw over to another example of a big city meetup that has kind of fallen out of regular meetings. And it's one that I attended myself for a very long time. Now, Charissa, you're here to tell us about the Sydney Accessibility Meetup. Give us your views on that.
Hi, thanks, Ricky. So I'm Charissa Ramirez. I'm a senior digital accessibility consultant working at Vision Australia, working on web and document accessibility, doing auditing and testing. The services for Vision Australia are for people with blindness and low vision, but we have a digital access team, which I'm part of. With regards to the meetup that happens, the Sydney based meetup, actually that meetup started as a breakfast meetup since 2010. And I've joined, I wasn't a member before in 2010. I joined the first one in 2014, back when the meetup was in a local cafe, 7:45 a.m. There's only like one or two tables and it's very small group. But in 2016, it became a 6 p.m. meetup, meeting face-to-face monthly. And from that small table of people where, you can just, you normally just see each other during those time and catch, and that small group of people grew into a wider connection and a lot of people networking with each other when over the years as the meetup grew, and it was kind of regular every month. But just like every other meetup, were affected by COVID, and that became an online meetup. And there's a few far in between meetups being held online and collaborating with some of the Alibites and Alicamp events. But we did start to again. We will start again doing more of these online meetups more regularly. I joined in as a co-organizer for Sydney now that the original organizers have moved to Melbourne. So there's other people running now. It's Harry and Lily, Stuart and Sarah now in Melbourne. So I'm helping out as a co-organizer. So that's some of the story about the Sydney accessibility meetup.
That's great, Charissa. Thank you. I was a regular attendee of the Sydney accessibility meetups as well for probably the mid 2010s onward until COVID. And I think there are some characteristics there that are very particular to Sydney as well. That kind of time was the heyday of face-to-face meetups. I was traveling regularly from where I live just near Wollongong to go to the accessibility meetup, to go to the CSS meetup, to go to the design systems meetup. And I was literally attending 3 or 4 meetups a week. And they were invaluable. They also had a characteristic that I think is a bit different to a lot of the others, in that there was a very big overlap and a mix between them. So there were a lot of disability people and accessibility people at the CSS meetup and at the design meetup, and there were a lot of mainstream web designers and developers who would come to the accessibility meetup. And that was the classic, for me, it was what I thought the format of all meetups was, that it would be after work, hosted by a company like Atlassian or Google in a very swish office, where you would have beers in tubs, you would have pizzas freely supplied, and they were often timed to coincide with things like the Web Directions Conference. So we'd have somebody who was talking at Web Directions Conference on a general design development topic would come along to the accessibility meetup to talk about something accessibility related. And we had, like, very well-known international speakers come along. So it was like, it was a social event, it was a professional event, and it was a way to connect with all the other people who were working in the same kind of way that you were. The meetups themselves took anything from 2 to 3 hours, and you might only have 2 presenters that gave 15-minute talks, and the rest of it was all just what we call networking with beers. And it was a very exciting time. And for myself, I could never understand why it kind of faded out. I mean, COVID obviously played a big part, but it seemed like we didn't. And I played a role in helping to organise the meetups, but it seemed like we didn't really take the opportunity of the online meetup to make sure that that kind of networking continued to happen. So it's a very particular one, and I'm hoping that I can play a role as well, along with you and Heron and Lily, in getting that going again, online and or face to face, whatever it takes, because I think there is a lot of support for it still, that kind of a meetup in Sydney. Okay, so we've got one more territory to cover in just the introductions, and that is the person who introduced this meetup, Bree Norton, who is a tour de force and an organiser of all kinds of things, not least the Canberra Accessibility Meetup. Over to you, Bree. You're on mute.
So Canberra Meetup, again, also hit by COVID. We were doing quite well when we could partner with a lot of the other events that were out there and bring, especially through OZeWAI conferences, and bring some of those keynotes to Canberra as well. Like we'd bring them in through to the Canberra Meetup and then bring them into the federal government as well. So there was quite a crossover that we could do. COVID hit as well, and particularly in Canberra, there's a lot of people now working remotely. Federal government, this idea that everyone is in Canberra, works for public service, is not the same anymore in Canberra. They're living all over the country. So what we're finding now, and we've just started doing a little bit more of, is that we're partnering with other meetups in Canberra that are doing quite well, that have the connections and the networking and the sponsorship. So the previous one was a product tank. On Product Tank Day, it was the week after GAD. So we kind of celebrated GAD at the same time, and we talked about embedding accessibility. And so Adem Cooper and I presented for that one. So the idea is to kind of partner with some of those meetups that are out there. And if we can, we might do some more of the online ones. I share any of the OZeWAI ones through the Canberra Meetup at the moment, so people are not missing out. But I am curious. I want to ask. There's some questions that you probably got to ask, Ricky. But I want to talk to find out a little bit more about the meetup itself. Using Meetup, I'm not happy using it. How do you get away from it? Like, what do we do? I know OZeWAI doesn't use it. So what are our options? But yeah, we'll probably get to that. But yeah, it's slow going again in Canberra, but we're finding a way to make it work with the Canberra meetups as well. Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, Bree. And I think one of the things that characterises the Canberra meetup that's a bit different from all the others is how you partner with other organisations. And often the events are held in partnership with a government agency, another accessibility agency, or somebody who's focusing on a specific aspect of, like as we're doing now in talking with people like ADSET. Just before we go on as well, I just want to give the perspective for anybody listening who's not aware of it, that GARD, the Global Accessibility Awareness Day that happens in the middle of May each year, is often a spur for these kind of events. And it's significant that the last Sydney Accessibility Meetup was based around the activity that Alibites has in Melbourne and Sydney that focus on celebrating Global Accessibility Awareness Day and inviting people to give lightning talks. That takes the role of the accessibility meetup in some ways and kind of ensures that they exist in some form at least.
Yeah.
I think, Bri, you've raised a very interesting topic there, which is that it's one thing to have the idea of meeting up with people on a regular basis, and even part of it is coming up with things like venues and how do you let people know it happens, all of that. But then there is the more infrastructure side of things of how do you actually share that information? How do you get people invited? And what means do you use to distribute tickets and registrations and things like that? Perhaps if we could go back round the circle and just quickly cover any particular experiences you've had, positive and negative, with ways of managing that. Back to you first, Bri, and your views on Meetup.
Yeah, so I'm finding the meetup is not as conducive for messaging. People are registering and using it, but I do find the way we're using through OZeWAI, the Humanitics site, and particularly the way you promote all these amazing events too, and maybe what we do is promote the meetups a little bit more specifically instead of just a line in the newsletter, put more details on the OZeWAI website. But yeah, I think the use of Humanitics itself and the social media is probably taking over, and people are just, on that meetup, but not necessarily involved. It's really become kind of like a quiet sit back and listen. But I suspect there were probably about 10 from the Canberra meetup that joined. You send them to the link to Humanitics to join this one. And there's a few that we'll go through and make that registration point. But yeah, I'd be interested in what other people have to say about that as well. And there's a cost, obviously, to the meetup community.
Yeah. And before I swing away to another person, let me add to that as well. How do you promote your meetup? How do you actually get word out about it?
So in Canberra, particularly, we do it by partnering now with the other meetups that do have a little bit more of that that strength. They've got a space. They get through to that community, all that kind of thing, and obviously just promoting it on the meetup itself, and through the socials through OZeWAI currently at the moment.
Okay,
that's how we do it.
All right. I might throw it back to Rosie there and ask on how in your meetup what infrastructure do you use to arrange registrations, etc., and how do you promote the meetup itself?
Yeah, Rosie speaking. I wanted to make a comment about what you said earlier, Ricky, about Swish offices and free pizza. We do have free pizza at the Tasmanian accessibility community. Not so much Swish offices. We are in the Rosie Library, which is quite cozy, I will say, and very community friendly with their rates. And yeah, no beers in tubs, but we do have my personal esky that has soft drinks in it. So we're doing our best on a low budget, which is funded by us. In terms of platforms, we have recently completely moved away from Meetup, and it was at a direct result of one of our someone who would like to come along. They were trying to sign up to Meetup, and it was like trying to sign them up to Plus. It made them like enter their birth year and also their card details just when they were trying to sign up for free. And as soon as we had that experience, we're like, nah, like we're not doing this. We already had an email mailing list that we're using. Particularly, we have a lot of blind and low vision folks in who come regularly to our meetup group. Meetup wasn't working, so we had a mailing list already that people could use. And then when we had that experience, we're like, it's not worth it. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't want anyone to have that. That's their first impression of us, is that the platform that we're using is like taking their credit card information and they don't feel comfortable using it. So as soon as we had that experience, we're like, we need to look into other options. And we changed to Humanitics as well. Have found that to be a great experience so far. We're finding actually more people are signing up using Humanitics than they were with Meetup, despite having like over 100 people in our like Meetup community. So yeah, Humanitics is great. And then it's just social media. And we also have a lot of people who are on our mailing list and forward our like event details onto other mailing lists. So there's the Blind Citizens Tasmania mailing list that we that frequently get forwarded onto. And so there's a lot of those sort of community mailing lists that are the best way to gain new people coming into the group as well. And also we support some other community groups in Tasmania. So there's arts community, accessible arts community of practice, and there's also a human-centered design group as well. So we all sort of share our events to it. Something we're trialing is having Facebook events as well. We find a lot of people are using Facebook as their primary social media rather than LinkedIn or things like that. So we've only tried that for 1 month. I don't know how many people are sort of using that, but I'm going to keep pursuing that. And that just links off to sign up through Humanitics anyway. But yes, I will keep pursuing that. But yeah, it's really sort of word of mouth and community-based mailing lists is the best thing for us.
Right, that's great. That's great. And what about you, Amanda? How do you handle all that in Perth?
Yeah, so we've had an interesting, we're recently have gone through the transition. So our meetup again, because we are probably the oldest alongside maybe Sydney, with 2010 being our first meetup, we were on meetup.com. We've been on meetup.com for years. And for years we've had people go, it's really not very accessible, including Dr. Scott Hollier, who used to head up our meetup group. And what was an accessible alternative? And it's actually taken a really long time to find sort of to make that transition. And in part, one of the challenges that we had, which maybe wasn't the same challenge in Rosie's case, or maybe even in Bree's case, was that we had 733 people on our mailing list, and we don't have access to any of their emails. So moving off of meetup.com meant that we had to have enough warning. We had to have an accessible platform to move to. And we still kind of have to. And in fact, Bree, I noticed that you stepped up as host. You weren't supposed to. We're trying to close Meetup. Don't host. I purposely let go of the hosting rights on meetup.com. We want to close it. We sent lots of messaging out saying that we were going to close it. We moved to Humanitics. We've been using Humanitics for PWAC, for the camp, for several years now. So we knew it was a much more accessible platform. So we decided last year following PWAC, or this year, sorry, following PWAC, that the move had to be made. And that meant that we had to plan it out a little bit because of the almost 800 contacts that we have in Meetup, and we don't have access to their email. So even if you get Meetup Plus, I went through a whole scenario where I paid for it. Well, the Meetup group paid for it, but I had the rights to we actually couldn't get people's emails. So we couldn't let people know and when this shuts down, we will lose all of those contacts who have not seen our message and or followed us on LinkedIn. So it was quite a challenging decision to make, despite the very obvious, like Rosie said, private details are being asked for personal data, the inaccessibility of it. We're really concerned about making that switch and not doing it and losing too many people. However, we kind of have to bite the bullet on this one. So we've begun that transition. We are now there's a message when you log into meetup.com that says we've moved to Humanitics. Follow us there and you'll get all of the messaging from there. In terms of promoting, so we've really upped our social media. We don't really have a mailing list, again, because we didn't have access to the meetup.com stuff. We're not being run. So it's not a digital accessibility agency that's running the Meetup. So it's been various people over the last 15 years that have run our Meetup. So we don't really have a mailing list. What we have are the people who have signed up for Humanitics to the camp. So we send messages out to people who have agreed. Obviously, Humanitics only sends to people who have agreed to receive contact. We've sent messages out saying, hey, everything's being moved here. If you like us as a host on Humanitics, you'll get an email every month about the upcoming event. So we're still we're still working around that. Our social media is incredibly active, thanks to Anas, and our new branding, I think, has really helped with that as well. It makes us distinct and stand out. So yeah, that's really what we're doing. In terms of actually meeting, we're using Zoom currently. We did try Microsoft Teams for a short time for PWAC. We did 1 year of that and it wasn't super successful, so we went back to Zoom. Ultimately, I really like the Google platform, but not everyone has easy access to the Google platform from a work perspective. So Zoom it is for now for our virtual meetups.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Adem, I might ask you, what are your views on past practices or future ideas in terms of the platforms that you use, the way you keep up with your membership, and how you promote the meetups?
Yeah, so we haven't faced into we've kind of seen the problems everyone's having with Meetup, and we're having some of the same things. Haven't faced into the move yet, though know that that's probably something that needs to be on the cards for at some point this year. But like Amanda was just saying, given we're kind of one of the oldest, we've got 900 and something members and no access to those contact details other than emailing people through Meetup. So that's kind of what's stopped us so far. And yeah, so that is something we're gonna need to look into in terms of kind of other platforms. So the way that we do things at the moment is the meetups are sort of face to face as the primary, and then provided I can get all the tech working each month, we will stream on the YouTube channel. So we've got a YouTube channel for our meetup, and do as much as we can to try and get streaming working so that for anyone who can't actually attend in person, they're still able to either watch the live stream or watch a recording after the fact on the YouTube channel. We're kind of experimenting as well with kind of different ways of doing that because obviously YouTube is one way. We thought about potentially having people sort of join the call and participate through Zoom as well, but haven't gone down that road at this point because one of the things with us is we're always at a different venue each meetup usually. So sometimes kind of getting all of that set up and tech requirements is a little bit more difficult than if you were at a kind of set venue each time and knew how kind of everything worked and how everything connected up together. We've seen some pretty good uptake, I think, of the way we're currently doing it because people sort of keep asking me for the live stream link, which means at least that there are some people that are interested in watching that. So I think we'll continue that for a bit and see how things go there.
Okay, that sounds great. Really interesting. Yeah. And as we can see, even so far, there's quite a variation in how people are handling these issues. Charissa, can you make any comment on how Sydney has handled the choice of platform, the way that registration is handled, and how you promote the meetups?
Well, coming in as a new co-organizer, I'm still in the participant side, but there's 1,700 members in the meetup because it's grown over the years. And yeah, that the platform change could probably be an issue, but of course the accessibility is really obviously could be a barrier if that doesn't allow some people to register or because there's other platforms that more accessible. So that would be something that we have to really consider because yes, that's the issue of not being able to get the details from the email details of the members of the group. So yeah, so right now it's still on meetup.com and it's been there for that long already.
Right. And what about promoting the meetups? What kind of means do you use to do that?
Because it's kind of a regular, I think for probably also for in your experience attending the city meetups, there's kind of like an expectation that what's happening? You try to check every now and then in the when you if you are an active participant in the meetup.com, but of course there's other socials that's it's more actively promoted on. A big part of it would be the LinkedIn promotion. So just posting about it and making sure that it's all the dates and all the details. There's also some consistency with the venue for some time, for a few months now in Atlassian. So people tend to already know that we're going to the same place at around 6 o'clock, at around sometime every month.
Right.
So hopefully that could continue, if not face to face, more of the online, giving more opportunity for others who cannot come physically to a venue.
Yeah, that's interesting. And look, I can certainly bear out people's comments about meetup.com in particular. I got very annoyed at the way they kept emailing me constantly with information about events I had no intention of attending. So I kind of more or less stopped dealing with their emails altogether, and I made a few complaints, and I managed to get myself black banned. So on my personal account is actually banned from meetup.com, which is, thanks very much for that. Luckily, I have many email accounts, so I sneak in other ways. Another bit of perspective that I'd like to give to this as well is that I attend regularly an online meetup called the WordPress Accessibility Meetup, run out of the west coast of the USA or central USA. And the time zones are reasonably friendly for me for that. And I've participated in a couple of them as well, where I presented or co-presented. And one of the things that really grabbed my attention with that particular meetup is that they are very, very slick. They know what they are doing. They use meetup.com. They use Zoom as their platform. They post the videos 2 weeks later on YouTube, where anybody can watch them. The presentations themselves have an American Sign Language live interpreter available. They provide closed captions. They're controlled closed captions that are posted live. A transcript is generated automatically. It's an incredibly slick operation. They have about 2,500 members, and they regularly have attendance of anything from 25 to 60 people, depending on the topic involved, which is only to say that I guess if you know how to work a system like Meetup to your advantage, it can work. There are still, downsides, like you don't have control over your mailing list, but it's interesting. And, the options for other ways of doing it are fairly limited, and probably more limited to us here in Australia than they are in other places like the USA and in Europe. Okay, so that's really interesting. I think we've got a good idea of the flavour of the 5 that are mentioned here. I should also make mention that there is technically a Brisbane accessibility meetup, which hasn't been, I don't think they've met since 2021. So I would say they would probably describe themselves as victims of COVID. And that kind of completes the circuit of the major Australian cities and territories. I think that is very interesting that all of them started in one way or another as in person, and they have all to some extent become online one way or another. And one wonders whether that is part of the future of these type of meetups in general. Now, I'm aware of the time, so I want to bring us forward to the idea of what OZeWAI has in mind, and the idea of a national online meetup. And I think it's fair to say that some of the kind of things that we're looking at there are to be able to enable people to attend who are not in the major cities. The fact is that, and I'm a good example. I live outside Sydney. I can make the trek in if I need to, but if there was an online alternative that I could attend from my home, then I would be very much in favour of that. I've actually often thought about starting a Wollongong accessibility meetup, but that would be about 4 people, which is, that matters, but those 4 people I regularly get together with coffee for anyway, so it works out okay. But there is also the idea of that because each of these meetups are regionally focused, they necessarily have characteristics of the place that they're held in, and they represent the interests of people in those particular territories, which are not always the same. Canberra is always going to be focused more on liaising with government agencies because Canberra is the head of the public service in Australia, So those kind of factors play into something that we have the idea that a national accessibility online meetup could focus more on national issues, including some of the things we want to achieve in OZeWAI, which is influencing national policy, increasing advocacy, introducing training systems for people that get them into the digital accessibility industry, even recognizing the industry as an industry. What I might do is go around again and get each of the panelists' thoughts on whether this would work together with the aims of a local meetup or would clash with it, whether you see that as something that is a desirable thing or it would be better to focus on your own local issues. Maybe I'll start with Amanda on that one.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of interest in doing this. So without my co-chair of OZeWAI hat on, keeping in mind that I wear both of these hats, I think that the uniqueness that is Perth, and we're quite proud of our uniqueness. The uniqueness that is Perth, it does allow for us to want to have a say, as you would, particularly in sort of that national and even where we sit as a nation and how we contribute internationally to digital accessibility. I think that having a Perth perspective is actually really important in that scenario. And it's easy in Perth to feel isolated, not just because we're the most isolated city in the world, but because oftentimes Perth is rarely consulted. I have another board executive that I sit on that is not to deal with accessibility at all, but they had decided that they were going to have a gathering in Sydney, and normally this happens every year. It's for a weekend, and they've decided they're going to make it one day. And I immediately said, "Hey, have you thought about the membership that we have in Perth? Because flying to Sydney for one day, schlepping across the country actually doesn't make a lot of sense. Not that that's a showstopper, but maybe we should give the Perth people a call, talk to the president of the organization there and give them a bit of a heads up and say, here's what we're going to do. And what do you think? So just that having that open communication, and being on the other side of the country, I think is really good. I think contributing at a national level. I wouldn't want to see it every month. As the head of the Perth Digital Accessibility Group, I don't want to see it every month. I think that would take away from what we're doing individually. That's really important. But I would like to see something maybe even on a semi-regular basis, maybe once a quarter, where we're all together, we're contributing to some of the work that OZeWAI is doing around advocacy, apprenticeships, some of the work that we're doing in procurement at OZeWAI. I think those are all really important bits and pieces that having a national input, keeping in mind too that lots of these, and our group is certainly a representative of this, lots of these groups have not just digital accessibility experts in them, but people working in other fields who have an interest in digital accessibility. So OZeWAI can then be gathering more information from a broader range of people as well. So that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Amanda. I might then throw to Charissa. What have your views on the idea of a national online accessibility meetup?
I think there's really a place for that, especially that in April, the guidelines for digital goods and services has been published,
Yeah.
and that would affect the whole nation in meeting those, making sure that the accessibility requirements in the Disability Act, now you have these guidelines on how to meet them, but people still have a lot of questions on how they're going to implement that, whether you're in government or you're working for a bank. So I think that's all the crossover that people can learn from each other in a national way, because it's going to affect us from now on. And now we have these guidelines. It's good to be discussing that as a whole. So yeah, I think there's that value in. Of course, there's many other things, but that's the one thing that comes top to mind because it's very recent.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Charissa. What about you, Adem? What are your views on the idea of a national accessibility meetup?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm kind of happy to try anything really. I mean, as long as it kind of complements the local
Yeah.
meetups, I think like Amanda
Yeah.
was saying, and doesn't sort of try and replace the local ones. Because
Yeah.
I think you were right, Ricky, when you were saying, the local communities and the local sort of meetups have their own flavor, and it's unique to kind of those local communities, right? So you don't want to lose that. But I think, I'm not necessarily opposed to a national online meetup because why not?
Yep, fair enough. Rosie, what do you think?
Rosie speaking. Yeah, I think similar to what Amanda said in terms of the uniqueness of Perth. I think the uniqueness of Tasmania and the issues that we're facing here is really relevant as well. Compared to any state, we have the largest population of people with disability. We're also the most digitally disadvantaged state as well. There's a lot of different sort of work that is happening here than many of the other states as well. So I think Tasmania's voice in terms of the digital accessibility space is really vital as well, and shouldn't be missed out in that broader national conversation too. So yeah, I think it's a great idea to have a national meetup, whatever shape that takes. I think it's interesting though that we're sort of having this conversation because I see us, the professionals, as a form of national meetup. Maybe it doesn't have as much of that informal chat that happens after sort of a meetup. Like, for example, we have a presentation and then, we go and have pizza afterwards and have an informal chat. So the national meetup, the us, the professionals, doesn't necessarily have that informal chat. And so I think maybe that's what we're talking about more, is having more of that informal chat side. But like I do see us the professionals as a form of national meetup already. So
Right.
maybe it's having us the professionals run as per normal. And then I think there was a suggestion in the chat from Don about hosting periodic meetups with an open house focus.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be more of like every quarter there's an open house, ask the professionals, where it's more of a networking and chat and update. And maybe we hear an update from each of the states and territories about what are the issues, what's going on there. And then it's more of an open conversation.
That's great. Thank you, Rosie. Look, I'll get your views as well on this, Bree, but before we do, I might read that question out from Don in full, because I think it touches on a lot of
Yeah.
things that you have views on, shall we say, Bree. Don's comment was, have you considered hosting periodic, quarterly or biannual meetups with a different focus, designed to be an open house for people not directly in the general accessibility community? This could bring in thought leaders, influencers, engineering leads, a range of people who are outside the bubble but are influencers and decision makers in their organisations. Agenda might be less in the detail and more about equipping them with messaging and materials about adopting accessibility practices in a material way and considering commercial realities. Now, I know, Bree, that you are you have, it's in some ways the idea of the national online meetup is your idea. So I'd like you to talk to us about that, but perhaps you could do that through the lens of Don's comment there as well.
Oh, look, I think that's such a great way of doing it. And, there's some opportunities. I think even John Alsop recently has done it through the software engineering space by an unconference. So getting people to share what their questions should be. We ask for topics for our Ask Professionals and then go and find the right people to talk about that. This is no different. I think this is a really great idea. And I think it would we could complement the few months that we have, besides having this meetup maybe in July and August, so it's not we're not all working up to the end of financial year, so maybe swapping the month. But the idea is complementing what we already have and allowing that time to be an open house It's one of the things I think we've started to build in our move from OZeWAI using Google Workspace, not for profit. We are now able to bring our members into a space where they can ask their own questions. Again, they're still pretty much accessibility specialists, so there is that support for them. So the open house does allow us that kind of approach where anyone that has that kind of general question can bring it to the community itself and kind of bring those questions over to us. Doing it in a way that has some pre-planning, make it accessible. The idea of the unconference. I've shared a link to an easy retro board. We use that a lot in our workshops through OZeWAI. Maybe setting something up where people start to ask those questions outside of the community. And then we kind of have that open house where they can bring those key ones that we want to, or the theme them together. So not everyone's asking the same question. So doing a little bit of pre-planning around it as well. But I think it's a really great idea. I love this idea. It's cool.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
There's another aspect to this which I kind of have always wanted to see OZeWAI do, and we haven't found a way to really succeed in it, but maybe an online event would help it, which is to profile the organisations and the people working in the industry today. I think very few people have an idea of the history of an organisation like Vision Australia and the role that it's played in digital accessibility in the country. I don't think people have an idea of how amazing the growth of Intopia has been over the last few years to become one of the major digital accessibility consultancies in the world. Nor do I think that people have a really clear idea of what GrackleDocs does and the key role that it plays in digital accessibility around the world. And I'd love to find a way of even just a 10-minute profile of, what these organisations are, whether they're members of OZeWAI or not, and hopefully, most of them are. But I think we'd find some way of exposing and promoting ourselves. And I'd love to see that happen in some way with an online community, because it's always going to be more direct than, say, writing a profile and posting it as a blog post or something like that, which is, we could do, and we have in fact tried in the past to do that kind of thing. It just didn't get very strong reactions one way or the other. I mean, to put that in perspective, we now have a much bigger newsletter readership than we've ever had, approaching 1,000 subscribers. So there are ways of doing that kind of stuff. But I think that that's also something that OZeWAI can and should take a major role in, is reflecting to other people and to ourselves the success stories that we have in the digital accessibility industry in Australia. And I mean, just a quick go around again of what people think about that in terms of, do we promote ourselves enough at an individual and at a collective level? I might start with you, Adem, because I mean, Intopia has been an absolutely glorious success story there, and you and Sarah and Stuart are to be commended on the success that you've had. How the hell did you do it?
That's a good question. It's we're almost 10 years old now, and I think our approach to, I guess, promotion, the approach to the way we do things has kind of stayed consistent and the same through that 10 years. But in terms of the promotion, I think that aspect of it has changed for us. I mean, you'll see us a lot more active now, I think, on socials and newsletters and that sort of thing than we have been in the past. And I think that's just down to the way sort of things are going now, and the fact that we need sort of different ways of reaching people, because different types of people are interacting with us in different ways, and we've got people all over the world now, and so the reach needs to be broader as well. So there's social channels, there's mailing lists, by mailing lists I mean people register for the newsletter and follow us on socials and all that sort of stuff. So I think we're getting better with promoting ourselves. Whether we're kind of where we want to be or where we need to be, I don't know. I'm not really a marketing person myself, so I'm probably not the one to ask this question to, really.
Okay, fair enough. Charissa, what are your thoughts on Meetup's roles, the national and or local ones, in promoting our own industry?
Well, from what I know with the history of Vision Australia, it has been the training ground for many of the web accessibility professionals that we now have in different agencies. We've got Andrew Arch, who used to be with the Vision Australia. We've got Steve Faulkner, who's now internationally renowned as an accessibility, guru. We have so many who had started their profession, myself included. That's my training ground 10 years ago, and now I'm back. That's my first volunteering role in Vision Australia. Now I joined them full time, so it's my full circle. And also all the digital access team that's doing the web auditing, all of because we are a not-for-profit, it goes back to servicing people who are blind and with low vision, and having in that industry and the focus of our organization helps us be really very connected with people with disabilities, especially those with blindness and low vision. So it gives us like a very rounded um, um, experience in the industry, and also with the policies and all the things that's happening, and also our staff. A lot of people where it's business as usual. We've got people with low vision working in Zoom
Yeah.
technology, and a lot of people are using the screen readers. So it's just an everyday thing. However, I want to put it the other way around. The role of meetups is also very important for people who are starting with accessibility. So much more than us promoting ourselves. When you are new in the accessibility, you remember the time that when you are feeling like, oh, what's accessibility? Am I the only one doing this? And then you found there's a meetup, and you find this community of people. It makes you more comfortable, and now feeling, oh, I'm not alone anymore. So there's this value of the meetups. So much more than us promoting ourselves, maybe yes, on the side, because that's one purpose of it, but also making us open to other people and make us findable for people who are new in the industry, and welcome everyone. We need everyone who would be interested
Yeah.
in doing this and are afraid to put their toes in the water. This meetup, and in whatever shape and form it is a ground for people to start their journey on accessibility.
Yeah, great points, Charissa. Thank you very much for that. That's terrific. Rosie, what have your views on the role of meetups, both local and national, in terms of increasing awareness of our own industry?
Rosie speaking. I think increasing awareness of our own industry, absolutely. In terms of sort of promoting ourselves, I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. I think for me it's really important to remain open and like as unbiased as possible. You know, we want folks who are part of other organizations to be along at our meetup as well. And I think that's something that the Perth meetup does really well in that having so many people who are working for different organizations come together. And it doesn't really matter where you work. It's coming together for the love of accessibility. And yes, you learn a little bit about the history of their organizations there, but it's sort of more than that. It's about the growth and really what Charissa said there before. I would like to ask a little bit of a meta question, if I can, back on the panelists about the ways in which we are making our own meetups accessible, like physically accessible in the spaces. How are we making sure our events are accessible as possible? It's sometimes a little bit out of our own specific area in digital accessibility and moving more to that event space, but it's a large part of running a meetup as well. So I wondered if I could put that question back on the rest of the group.
Sure, I think that's a very good question to ask. What I might do is throw over to Amanda and get your views on the idea of the role of meetups in terms of promoting ourselves, and add in that factor of how do you actually go about making meetups accessible?
Yeah, so in terms of promotion, so I think that what we want to be very careful of is we don't want to be a sales pitch. I think that what I would like to see more of, and a role that OZeWAI can play, is in promoting individuals who have been contributing to accessibility in this country. I think that um, Center for Accessibility does this a little bit with their Hall of Fame, but I would love to see OZeWAI step into that role a little bit more, and maybe that's spotlighting people who are doing great things in the industry in some way. That doesn't mean we have to have an award, but being able to showcase people who have been doing this for sometimes a short time, but most of us for quite a long time, and really contributing to where digital accessibility is in 2025 and where it will be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I think that that is, to me, is more important from a national point of view. From a local point of view, I agree with Rosie. I think that local meetups are where you come and you meet that expert and you go, hey, I don't know how to add alt text. That's where that should be happening. I think that it's not about promoting our companies on a meetup level. They're supposed to be informal. Certainly the Perth meetup is quite informal. We spend the first half hour catching up while I plait my daughter's hair for school. And it's supposed to be like that. And I think we really, in Perth anyways, would want to keep that. Um, there's always like, so for example, with PWAC, with the camp, you know, GrackleDocs gives me the opportunity to spend lots of time they sponsor the camp. I think those are where GrackleDocs comes into it, and I'm always very happy if someone wants to come and ask me about what GrackleDocs does or the role that we're trying to play within the industry in this region. I'm the person to ask. I'm the vice president of GrackleDocs for this region. I want to have those conversations for sure, but I'm not sure that that's a place in Meetup for that, other than when you're asked. I think from an OZeWAI perspective, that's what the consultancy is for,
Mm.
the consultancy list. That's why GrackleDocs pays their membership at that level and not me individually as a $50 member. We pay the consultancy rate, which is not an insignificant rate, to be on that list, to be seen as an expert, to sign and say we're going to do the right thing by all of our customers and we know what we're doing. So I think that in my mind, I don't want a meetup, national or otherwise, to be sales pitch. We've had that at OZeWAI, and we had to change the rules because we had a presentation that was sales pitchy at OZeWAI. I very much remember that one. I remember that entire conference, actually. It was a very significant conference. There were a few things that happened that one. In terms of making Meetup, our group, accessible. So from a conference perspective, when we have our in-person and our online once a year in February, we have captioning and those sorts of things. We try to make it as accessible as possible. Auto captioning we're basically at the mercy of auto captioning at this point. We're run by a very small group of volunteers. There's about 5 of us, including an us who does all the social media. So unfortunately, we're pretty limited in terms of, and that's one of the reasons I noticed Adem mentioned that they live stream on YouTube. One of the reasons we don't record our sessions, our monthly sessions, is because getting those properly captioned and released on our YouTube page is a bit of a nightmare. And we just don't have any time. A volunteer has to put their hand up. We all work full-time jobs while running the meetup. So we've just really struggled with that. Physically, in the past, we've had a really accessible venue. So we've been out of Visibility Australia. Here in WA, they've got a really physically accessible theaterette. We've, however, outgrown that theaterette. So that's one of the things from a physical point of view that we've had on our radar for the next venue. We have a pretty good idea where that is, but I won't spoil it until we've confirmed everything we need to confirm about it. But one of the major items of that was making sure that was accessible physically. This year, we introduced a quiet room for people who found the event overwhelming. Again, Visibility is a great venue, but it is quite small for 100+ people, and that's what we were accommodating. So it could be really overwhelming for people. So we had a quiet room and spaces for people to go. But we're open to suggestions. If people have suggestions about physically making it more accessible, we're really happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you very much, Amanda. And Bri, your thoughts on both the role of meetups, local and national, in terms of promoting and creating more awareness of disability accessibility industry, and how you go about making your own meetups accessible.
Yeah, and look, it's a fine line, I guess, too, because all of us work for organisations, that pay us. That should we be promoting them in that space? I try very hard to keep the OZeWAI side of things impartial to what happens, which is one of the main reasons that we started the consultant directory was that it was an agreement that it was that was a way for people to find things without giving any bias on who to contact, so that list is there. And now it's amazing that it's on the Human Rights Commission guidelines and also on the Queensland Government's procurement by ICT. So, if you do want to find someone, there's a partial way through the community deciding the quality of that. And the people in the way OZeWAI works is you have to give back. You can't just go on that consultant directory. You have to give back, which is why a lot of these people in the room are running meetups or putting that information into, those communities. So I think it's important, basically for the national meetup to have that kind of promotion aspect, but the directory kind of allows us to do that. And I guess if we're partnering in person and people are volunteering their time, we encourage people to bring their flyers, their banners, whatever, to promote whatever they're doing. Charissa brings a whole lab, Vision Australia material. It's not, you can, as part of your volunteer and your community aspect, you can still bring and support who you've got on the directory to do that. So we encourage that. In the meetup, actually running the OZeWAI conference in person for 4 or 5 years, I've got probably a lot of material. So maybe there's a blog post in that that would help you, Rosie and Amanda. We could write that together and provide some advice for those that are looking for the in-person experience. There's obviously other resources out there as well that you can bring in. But I think one of the things that I'd like to share is that OZeWAI, the idea is that you join as a member. We help support the community and the communities that are out there, whether they're meetups or not. So if there is something that you need and you are giving back to the community, we will try and work out a way to give it back to you as well. So, if there's a cost involved in a venue, maybe that's an agreement of an MOU of your membership with OZeWAI. So we want to work on that environment and make sure that we are here to support anyone. And I noticed, even with the intros at the start, there's quite a few people that are joining remotely who are not able to get to some of these in-person networking. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And we do want to hear from you about what you'd like to see, if it's a national meetup, more about the Ask the Professionals, more of what you want from your OZeWAI membership. Is coming up to renewal you'll be getting messages about that, and there'll be a survey. We want to hear from you. Let's do what you need. We are 2 years in this professional membership, and we'd like to make sure that we give back to those communities that are supporting us and helping us grow, because in turn, we're going to be helping you as well, individually.
Okay. And what about making the actual meetups that you hold physically accessible?
Yeah, so interestingly, there's some in just even in running the OZeWAI conference, and currently as the work that I do at AbilityWorks, any of the events, there's an aspect of AbilityWorks itself as an organisation is needs some cultural change around digital accessibility. Their physical is actually pretty good, but when we are working with events or in partner events. We will ask a lot more about what what's the guide or what's the approach that is available. And even through AbilityWorks now, we've started what was called an office access guide that could be used for your venue, Rosie, something like that. And you can share that on your meetup and say, these are all the things that are available, so that when people are asking, they don't have to say it, say everything like 5 times every time they come. You actually are already listing the things that are available for people to attend. So
No,
there's some.
thanks, Brie. Sorry, I wasn't asking because I needed advice. I was more
No, no, no. I
interested
know
in
you don't. I know you don't.
what folks are up to. I really wanted to share two really cool things that we've done
Excellent.
recently in our
Yeah.
group. The first is obviously running a hybrid event has its challenges, particularly when a lot of group people in the room, sort of those microphones that you put in the middle of the room that is circular aren't always great in having clear audio. So something that we did in our group to invest in was buying some sort of portable Rode mics, typically ones that you can clip on. But what we've actually done is we've got the holders for them. Makes it a lot easier when we're passing it around the room for folks who are blind and low vision to have something physically to hold on. It doesn't amplify it at all. We don't really need that with the size of group that we have, but really clear audio for our Zoom attendees and also for our recording as well. It was a little bit of an investment. I found other uses for those microphones as well, but a simple thing that we're able to do, and we have two mics that are roaming mics, not amplified, but have that clear audio for our folks on the call, and so to have really crisp, clear recordings as well, which we do caption and pop on our YouTube afterwards when I can get the time. Definitely empathizing with Amanda and in not having enough time. And then another thing that we've done that we're working on at the moment is having an air purifier for the room as well. We always have online available for folks who are not able to attend, but for some of our folks who are immunocompromised or being really COVID cautious, we really encourage masks, but having an air purifier in the room just adds that extra layer of accessibility beyond some of the more like typical stuff we see with physical access and things like that as well. So yeah, I was just interested to hear if there
Sounds
was
like you've got the blog post ready, Rosie, and I
yeah,
just need
maybe
to add
it's
to
me.
it.
Maybe it's me doing the blog post.
Excellent.
So yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. And look, maybe that's where OZeWAI can come in because of some of those costs, and we can, share that around as people need them, that kind of thing. Sorry, Ricky. You go.
No, that's okay. That actually leads me to my closing, which is to run around the five panelists here. And if you had to make a choice between OZeWAI hosting a national online meetup or helping provide resources for your local meetup, what would you choose? Let's start with Amanda.
National meetup.
Right. That's very clear cut.
Yeah, well, we're in a unique position as well, right? So we're really well established. We're 15 years in.
Yeah.
We've put an enormous amount of work into branding and getting the message out there. We've got a really strong core. So for us, having a national meetup is going to provide the most yeah, the most opportunity and the best scenario for us.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Adem, what about you?
Yeah, probably the national meetup because like Amanda, we're pretty established in terms of things here. So yeah.
Okay. Charissa?
I have to confer with the rest of the organizers, but I at the moment I think getting that support for the local meetup, getting reviving Sydney once more to its days before. I think there's value in it. Of course, the national meetup is also something that I mentioned. It's a really good thing to have, but for now, just physically at a particular period of time, the resources for the local.
Okay, yep, that makes sense. Bree?
Yeah, look, I'm a bit, a bit of both, I think. The local, I think, in some ways comes with the national. So that's not too bad. Again, I think partnering with the organisations we have, what I find more from the local meetups is, and probably where Charissa's getting to as well, is that you need some volunteers who are dedicated, which is what Adem, Amanda and Rosie have at the moment. So, understanding that the people that are volunteering, it could be a staged approach. So like just getting to the assistance for the local meetup, that you get the people that are actually going to, be coordinating, doing all that work, maybe putting some roles and ideas of what needs to happen in place. And then for definitely needs to coordinate into a larger one where there's a national meetup for those that can't get to the cities. So a lot of the people that are on the call today,
Right.
who are remote. So that to me is maybe there's a staged approach for those that are still just trying to pick up their feet again.
Okay. Rosie, what are your thoughts on that kind of, if you had only a choice between OZeWAI runs a national meetup or it helps to support the Tasmanian meetup, which way would you choose?
Gosh, such a tricky one, Rosie speaking. Ooh, I don't know. I like hear both sides of I like to definitely agree with Amanda and Adam in that even though we're not as sort of long established, I feel like we're running quite well at the moment, and maybe don't need as much support. But I would like support to be there for other meetups who do need it and want to get started, because I think getting started and taking that plunge is really tricky, or getting restarted after a long period of not having meetups is really tricky. So I want that support to be there for people who need it, even though we maybe don't necessarily need it at the moment. But I would also like to consider, maybe rethinking the way we think of a national meetup, and maybe the professionals are a form of national meetup. Maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel on something that's working really well. Maybe it's just having a different style of Ask the Professionals. So I'm going to be a fence sitter for this one. Sorry, Ricky.
No, that's quite all right. Look, frankly, it was a deliberately false dichotomy that I set up. There's nothing to actually stop OZeWAI doing both. There's no reason we can't have an online meetup that draws in people who are not based in capital cities, who can't attend or don't want to attend the local meetups, but want to look at issues that are on a national frame. And there's also no reason why we can't support, if there is a local meetup that needs resourcing, that we put in effort and funds in order to make that happen. Personally, I think meetups offer a kind of support and networking that is really not available in any other way. Whether they are face-to-face and or online, they serve an incredibly important purpose. The reality is that the digital accessibility industry in Australia is still very young. We have a long way to go. We need to network with each other. We need to share information. We need to share learning. And I think that OZeWAI is pretty determined to play an active role in all of those areas now and into the future. We're coming up almost to the 90 minutes there. I've made everybody do an awful lot of talking, and I thank you all very much for that. I don't see an awful lot of questions here. So I think at this point, the smart thing to do is probably to thank each of you, Adem, Amanda, Rosie, Charissa, and Bree, for your views on the local meetups. I think you'll all hear more from OZeWAI on this topic in the future. And I thank you all very much for your participation today.
Thank you. And thank you, Ricky, for a wonderful moderation.
Thank you, Ricky.
It's been great. Excellent. And keep an eye out for the recording and and your renewals. And if you haven't already, join OZeWAI. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye
Thanks,
for now.
everyone.
Bye.